Well, it's the UN Chief's first General Assembly and Donald Trump's too. It's also the first assembly for several African leaders. Others have been coming for years. Let's take a look at Africa's interests at the assembly this year.
Africa's Sahel region is facing a rise in terrorism. French President Emmanuel Macron will be meeting with the leaders of 5 African nations to discuss that. Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Burkina Faso and Chad are putting together a 5,000-strong force to combat the threat. That comes as so-called terror fatigue is on the rise when it comes to Africa. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has called for truly bold reforms, but the United States has its own UN reform plans, not necessarily aligned to Africa's reform agenda. Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe is attending the General Assembly. He's brought an entourage of around 70 people and is one of Africa's longest-serving leaders. In the past, Mugabe has been known to focus on UN reform. He's expected to do so again. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari is also focusing on reform. He's the 8th speaker at the Assembly and the 2nd African after Guinea's Alpha Conde. Helping people displaced by insurgency and continued international assistance for kidnapped Nigerian schoolgirls are on Nigeria's agenda. Some of the main side events at the Assembly focus specifically on Africa. The troubles in the Central African Republic, South Sudan and Libya are among them. And of course, top priority for the Secretary General is the migration crisis. Cornelis van der Auger, CGTN.
Well, let's get you some more perspective on that story. I'm joined live in studio by Dr. Robert Kagiri. He is the Director in charge of Strategy and Policy Management at the African Policy Institute. Dr. Kagiri, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. What agendas will South Africa specifically be pushing at the UN General Assembly, and what can we expect from President Zuma's speech?
Well, one of the priorities of their engagement with the UN at the General Assembly is to basically lobby for a seat in the 15-member Security Council for the end term of 2009, for the end term of 2019-2020. And above and beyond that, they are also unique in the fact that they have been one of the few countries that had nuclear capabilities, but has voluntarily given up those nuclear capabilities. So they'll be focusing on prevention of nuclear proliferation across the world. And this is a very opportune topic because, as you heard from Donald Trump's address earlier on, the nuclear threat from North Korea has come to the center stage. So they'll be addressing a very pivotal aspect of this General Assembly meeting. Then there's the issue of the sexual exploitation and prevention of abuses by UN peacekeeping forces, which they are one of the major contributors to. And they are telling the United Nations body that they are addressing this and they want to be at the forefront of the prevention of these abuses happening and being investigated by the UN. So those are the key areas they want to. Of course, the traditional areas of more inclusivity and more attention to African problems will feature as well in his address. Yes. For
reform of the UN, that debate is also on the table as well, and African nations will be pushing for that, especially countries like Nigeria. How important is that for Africa?
How important is this forum for Africa?
Reforming the UN.
Reforming the UN is important for Africa because they feel that the agenda that is set there is not their agenda. They feel that we are the one continent that has been left out of the permanent membership of the Security Council, so we do not have as much say as we should, having some 50 odd nations as part of the UN General Assembly. So they feel that they have more clout than is being projected in the UN, and they want to play a larger role in projecting. Let us not forget that the UN today is also competing with other international bodies, some of them which you mentioned in your clip there. We talk about the G20, the BRICS, the AU, all these bodies which are more attuned to Africa's problems today. So they are competing basically for space, and what Africa is trying to say is that we are here and we need more inclusivity and more voice in setting the agenda, the African agenda, in this 72nd UN General Assembly. Yes.
But the continent has also been facing quite a number of crises, from militancy, conflict, refugees. Are these issues taking a backstage on the international stage?
I would not say they're taking a backstage. What they're doing is that they are also competing for humanitarian space. If we were to take an example of, say, China and India, about 75% of the incidences of humanitarian crises have been in those two countries alone. So while Africa appears to have more problems, they are also competing for space with other countries across the world. And I have mentioned some who are also involved in the humanitarian space that do have their own problems. So what we need to do is try and bring our problems to be aligned with and at the center stage of what is happening in humanitarian space across globally. So they're not being put at the backstage, but they have to also be projected by the owners of those problems and brought to the center stage, because they are important and they need to be dealt with. So I think that is what appears to be that they are being relegated to the backseat.
All right.
Yeah, more than anything else.
We appreciate those insights, Dr. Robert Kagiri.
Thank you very much.
So much for your time. Yeah.